Hello, everyone, and welcome to the premiere episode of Okay, Now What? A political podcast where a group of progressives come together and give their political opinions on current events. We are your co hosts, and we're going to go around and first introduce ourselves. And then we'll get on with the show. So, Elizabeth, can you please go ahead and introduce yourself?
Yeah, so I'm Elizabeth Trejo. I love politics. I'm a progressive. I want to see real change here in the state of California, and I'm glad to be here.
Awesome. Thomas, can you please introduce yourself?
Yes, my name is Thomas Spate. I'm a British immigrant in the United States, and I'm a leftist.
Nice. And where do you live?
I live in Pomona, California.
Nice. Robin, can you go ahead and introduce yourself?
Hi, everyone. I'm Robin. I am a recent graduate, a progressive, and a political junkie, just trying to make good, effective change within California.
Awesome. And lastly, Jason, but not least, go ahead and introduce yourself.
Yeah, I'm Jason Call. I live a little bit north of Seattle, Washington. I have been a progressive activist on a number of issues for the last 30 years. Former high school math teacher and now current candidate for Washington's 2nd Congressional District.
Awesome. And I am Greg Arias. I live in Pomona, California. I am also progressive. If you follow me on social media, you might remember me from the Greg Show, but that's no longer a thing. And I'm currently a college student. I'm majoring in theater and journalism, specifically political journalism. And yeah, that's enough about me. All right, so let's go ahead and start with today's discussion. We are going to start with the lockdown that happened at DC prior to the inauguration. So days prior to the inauguration, DC prepared for the worst. National Guard and military personnel were sit down to secure the Capitol following the events on January 6th. Now we're going to go ahead and share a clip and then give our thoughts on the matter.
As the House of Representatives debates impeachment, there is incredibly tight security out here on the streets of Capitol Hill. As you can see, the streets are deserted. They've been closed off in the entire area surrounding the Congress. There's also been this very tall fence put up all the way around the Capitol building to try to stop a repeat of those scenes that we saw last week on Wednesday when a crowd of Trump supporters stormed into the very heart of Congress. Now, this is not just for the impeachment process. This is also in the build-up to the inauguration of Joe Biden as President of the United States on the 20th of January. A state of emergency has been declared here in the District of Columbia until at least the inauguration date itself. And as you can see here, National Guard troops have been brought into the district. They're armed with assault rifles, and we could see 15 or even 20,000 of them out on the streets during the inauguration of Joe Biden as US President. And it's not just out here on Capitol Hill. Inside the Capitol building itself, there were photos that emerged on Wednesday morning local time here in Washington of National Guard troops asleep in the very corridors of power inside the Congress as they arrived to protect that building. Giles Gibson for CGTN in Washington.
All right. Now, starting with Thomas, what's your take on that?
Well, it's almost like US foreign policy has just come back home, basically. You know, for a country that spends so much money on the military, for them to sleep on the floor is just incredible. I think it's incredible to see. I mean, basically just, the years of the US being in Iraq, being in countries around the world, the way that the military has been used, it's just foreign policy that's now becoming domestic. That's all that's happening here. It's coming back home in a way that Americans haven't seen on their own soil.
Yeah.
That's my take, basically.
Elizabeth, what do you think? What are your thoughts on the matter, on what you just saw?
I think it's like an unfortunate situation we find ourselves in, because their presence is there, a fear of this backlash, which is the Trump supporters. So I just think, I mean, it was necessary. I think it's a we could have used the money somehow else, but it was necessary.
Yeah. Jason, do you think it was too much? Do you think they maybe have overreacted, or do you think it was necessary, like Elizabeth said?
I'm always very nervous when I see military uniforms
Oh yeah.
in this capacity. One of the first things that I thought was, well, it just shows you that the local police forces are not enough to deal with this threat, and as we found out, that many of the local police forces around the country had members who were in the insurrection on January 6th, who are members of far right extremist groups. And I think that we can't count on your civilian municipal police forces to handle this kind of thing. You've got to ask yourselves why, and as part of the why that so many of them really can't be trusted to do the job. It's unnerving. I might fall in the direction of what Elizabeth said. I mean, I think back to 2000 when George Bush got elected, and what a different scene it is when we had people, lining the streets, both in support and opposing him, some pelting his motorcade with eggs. But, you had people out there. Of course, you couldn't do this with COVID now, but it's really, it's a weird transition for our country.
Yeah. Robin, what do you think that if, let's say, DC wasn't on lockdown, for the inauguration, do you think there would be riots?
I feel like I don't want to say there would have been or speculate, because the insurrection did happen. And there were, if you go on TikTok, if you go on Twitter, if you go on like these social media platforms, there were still talk about going to the inauguration and showing up and not letting President Biden be inaugurated. So I think it was necessary. I think it was an unfortunate thing, but it just goes to show you how Trump's rhetoric has just led to these people becoming more and more comfortable with showing up, raiding the Capitol, and just showing that the flaw within our justice system, that these people are more comfortable with hate speech. Usually, I don't know it's how to say it, but I was just like, it was necessary. It's unfortunate that was necessary, but all those people need to now be investigated. These police departments that had people, their own officers there, needs to be investigated. States need to do a more thorough vetting check of their police officers.
Yeah.
And their elected officials.
Yeah, I just find it that, we were able, as citizens who visit the Capitol, we're able to walk on the steps of Capitol Hill. We're able, because it's ours. It really is. And, it's like, I feel like what happened was, you couldn't share your toys, so now you got to take it away from them. That's how I felt. And I just hope that, we're able to return to where, where we don't have to worry about, MAGA people starting another riot. But it was quite unfortunate seeing a Capitol go on lockdown because of a group of people. So, yeah.
I also, if I can just add in for a second, one of the things that worries me about this, and again, if it was necessary, it was necessary. We, have to maintain safety. It's a lot of people would bring up Benjamin Franklin's old saying that people who would give up essential liberties for a little safety deserve neither. I don't know that this was one of those cases. But, you know, as things proceed, as, you know, if the economy worsens, as climate worsens, as there is more civil unrest and more people clamoring to have their government be responsive to their needs, you know, what we see is a veer towards more authoritarianism, you know, in the under the auspices of, you know, keeping everybody safe. But, you know, how much is that going to impact our right to protest for things that are our real needs in the future?
Yeah, that's a very good point.
Mhm.
All right, so let's go ahead and share. I'm going to share another clip, and we'll move on to our next story.
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear
I, Kamala Davy Harris, do solemnly swear
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
against all enemies, foreign and domestic,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same,
that I take this obligation freely
that I take this obligation freely
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion,
that I will well and faithfully discharge
that I will well and faithfully discharge
the duties of the office on which I am about to enter.
the duties of the office upon which I am about to enter.
So help me God.
So help me God.
Repeat after me. I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear
I, Joseph Robinette Biden Jr., do solemnly swear
that I will faithfully execute
that I will faithfully execute
the office of President of the United States
the office of President of the United States,
and will, to the best of my ability,
will to the best of my ability
preserve, protect, and defend
preserve, protect, and defend
the Constitution of the United States.
the Constitution of the United States.
So help you God.
So help me God.
Congratulations, Mr. President.
All right. And so there you have it. On January 20th, Joseph Biden became president of the United States, and Kamala Harris became our vice president. Now, I mean, as most progressives, we are happy that Trump is gone. However, we're also bitter. So, Elizabeth, what are your thoughts?
I'm excited to have Joe Biden and Kamala Harris as our leaders now. Of course, yes, I'm upset that it wasn't a progressive, but you know, I just kind of keep thinking like we have to meet people where they're at. And unfortunately, the country doesn't really like hold like neoliberals, you know, accountable, or maybe they don't understand what that means. And I am glad to go back to some sense of normalcy.
Okay. Now, I know that there's a lot of definitions on what normalcy is, or like going back to normal. But some people have different meanings on that, you know. Thomas, what do you think? What is your take on the whole going back to normal thing that you hear a lot?
I mean, look, I grew up in Europe. I grew up in the UK. The definition of normalcy here is very different to the rest of Europe. Here, normal is no healthcare. Here, normal is no form of social safety net. Here, it's completely different. And I think we need to, I think going forward, progressives and leftists need to try and articulate the difference between neoliberals within the Democratic Party and actual leftists and people. We need to articulate that and try and get away from this polarization that has happened with the Trump presidency. It created the foundations for the Democrats to basically say anyone but Trump, and I think we need to move away from that. And I know, unfortunately, a lot of neoliberals in the Democratic Party will continue to use Trump as a mechanism to get people on board with things that just do not help them, that just do not go anywhere, does not push them, just doesn't go far enough at all. I mean, the pandemic has shown this. It's shown the incapability of the system that we're in right now.
Yeah,
I think we desperately need to organize people in a way to get people to recognize that the current established members of a Democratic Party are not good enough.
Yeah.
Go.
I'm sorry to cut you off. What were we gonna say?
No, I finished.
Oh, okay. Jason, now, I mean, you're running for Congress. How should people in Congress, especially progressives, hold this administration accountable?
So the reality is we don't have enough progressives in Congress. And so the ones who are there are going to have to be a very loud voice. And we're going to have to work on, not to highlight myself, but, we're going to have to work on getting more progressives in Congress. I know and this is not an ego thing for me, my run. I always said throughout last year that if I could trade my race to ensure 2 progressives got in, I'd do it in a heartbeat. But, we are now looking to Cori Bush and Jamal Bowman and Rashida Tlaib to be our standard bearers, AOC, Ilhan Omar. We need them to be out in front every second of the way. Or the real danger is that because we could dial the clock back to 2008 and we can see these first 4 years of Biden be a repeat of the Obama years. And the real analysis is that the Obama years led us to Trump. It was neoliberal politics that didn't serve the working class. And a lot of people went to Trump because, as much of a charlatan as he is, and he turned out to be, really awful in so many ways, damaging to our country. But, they went there for a reason. And the reason is we didn't support workers' rights. We shipped jobs overseas. We broke people's banks on a terrible healthcare system. The Democrats have got to get behind these policies, and now we have the added really urgent. We have got to tackle this climate change. I think now is the time for us to really be challenging establishment Democrats wherever we can. Now is the time to keep pressuring them on policy.
Yeah, I agree. Robin, so what's your take on the whole inauguration, the new administration? How did you feel, just waking up into a new era of American politics?
I was relieved. I was excited, mostly because I am a person of color. My dad does wear a turban. He does, fit most of my family members look really Indian. They wear turbans. They have long beards. So I was just excited to have a president where it wouldn't add to the anger, they wouldn't add to the rhetoric of anti-Muslim, Islamophobic, and all those terms, where I wouldn't have to worry if my dad went to Walmart, is he going to be attacked or is he going to be verbally harassed? So I was excited for that. I'm relieved that we don't have someone in office who didn't care about the title he holds, the power he holds, who only did it for his ego. Yeah. And I'm also excited to see the policies that these leaders bring and holding them accountable to their word, and just having a president who does their job, where it's not just having a Diet Coke button, going to like Mar-a-Lago and like golfing, where they're actually working.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, for me, it was a fresher breath air, not to give in to the whole neoliberal propaganda, but it really was. It really was. Every day of the Trump administration, I was like, he did what now? He said what now? And I'm like, are we going into World War III? It was scary. Those 4 years, But now that we know what brought us with Trump, we need to hold this new administration accountable. We can't just, yeah, she's a person. Yes, Kamala Harris being our vice president is great for people of color because she's not just the first woman, she's a woman of color. But it was great to see that. But now, when you really look at who she is as a person, where's the substance? What does she really support? Is she going to be a vice president of her donors or a vice president of the people?
Mhm.
So, we got to keep that in mind too. So, Amanda Gorman made history at the inauguration, which she made a very inspiring poem. And I'm going to go ahead and share with the audience now, and we'll give our quick take on that.
We are striving to forge our union with purpose.
No one really gets to say at 22, I am the inaugural poet.
We've learned that quiet isn't always peace, and the norms and notions of what just isn't always just is.
On the Wednesday in which we saw the insurrection at the Capitol, that was the day that the poem really came to life, and I really put pedal to the metal.
We've seen a force that would shatter our nation rather than share it, would destroy our country if it meant delaying democracy. And this effort very nearly succeeded. But while democracy can be periodically delayed, it can never be permanently defeated.
I wanted it to be a message of hope and unity. And I think that Wednesday for me really just underscored how much that was needed, but to not turn a blind eye to the cracks that really need to be filled.
But one thing is certain. If we merge mercy with might and might with right, then love becomes our legacy and change our children's birthright.
Poetry is a weapon. It is an instrument of social change. And poetry is one of the most political arts out there because it demands that you rupture and destabilize the language in which you're working with. Inherently, you are pushing against the status quo. And so for me, it's always existed in that tradition of truth-telling.
For there is always light if only we're brave enough to see it, if only we're brave enough to be it.
Amazing. Elizabeth, go ahead and share us your thoughts on this segment.
Amanda's poem was my favorite part of the inauguration. I think it was a wonderful gift that we needed as a nation. And I'm really just excited for kind of like the glass ceilings that they're shattering and kind of like the empowerment that they're giving Black girls in our country, people of color. And I'm just really excited because to me, we can criticize American politics, but something that I personally think is like, at the end of the day, American politics has been dominated by white men.
Yeah.
So I just feel like they're opening the door for women of color. And I have faith that we can lead the nation to greatness.
Wow. Anyone else want to share?
That poem was also my favorite. Amanda Gorman is such an amazing writer. That poem was, a better call for unity than anything else I've heard. It acknowledged the painful past. I think the birthright of like our children line really got to me, and I was just like, oh dang, like, we're not just creating this future for ourselves and the betterment of our futures, but like our children, like future people who come into this country. It's just everything that we needed during the inauguration. I think it was the best speech out of the inauguration. So
yeah, I happen to agree with everyone what you two said. Anyone else want to give their take?
I hope with the administration obviously putting this front and center, I hope coming out of it we see legislative change, racial justice, racial inequity. These things are, I mean, it's been desperate for such a long time, but I mean, the pandemic has really torn this into a completely different monster. And I think going forward, we need to be holding this administration accountable in terms of, in terms of what the people voted for, what we saw over the summer. We desperately need racial injustice to be tackled head on, and that comes with actual policy. So I hope these appointments, I hope the representation that we're getting leads to go beyond just representation. We need policy that changes people's lives and helps them in a way that we haven't seen before.
Yeah. Jason, go ahead.
Yeah, I'll echo what's been said here. It was easily the best words of the inauguration, the best sentiment, the most forward thinking, and the most unifying. But absolutely what Thomas said there, if we can get policy as powerful as the poem, you know, we have a future to look forward to. I worry when I contrast that with, you know, Biden's inauguration speech where he said things like America has never failed, and I cringe because I say America has a history of failure of failing its people. Let's make sure that we move away from American exceptionalism and put people first, because American exceptionalism does not put people first. You know, if we want to be truly exceptional as a nation, we will focus on making sure that our people's needs are met, all people everywhere.
Yeah, and we'll go ahead and end on this. I think that if you are going to talk about unity, if you're going to talk about bringing everyone together and talking about the future of this nation, or, you know, some great things that we were able to achieve, leave it to the poet. Leave it to the poet. If you're the politician, talk about policy, because that's your main job. Talk about how your policy is going to unite us, and talk about how your policy is going to do us better. And she did a great job by doing the poetic stuff, and especially, you know, her being the youngest person of color to do so and such a big stage. That's really great. Now getting into the inauguration. So on Biden's first day in office, he signed more than a dozen executive actions, some which reversed many decisions by former President Donald Trump. Biden signed 3 executive orders implementing a mask mandate on federal property, increasing support for underserved communities, and rejoining the Paris Agreement. Other executive actions include directly targeting and undoing Trump's actions on the environment, immigration, and the U.S. Census, and regulatory changes. So I'm going to go with Robin. What are your thoughts on Biden's first day?
I think it was productive, if not at least, you know, putting us, not to say normalcy again, but putting back at like page 0, you know, like reversing some of those horrible executive orders. At least, again, you know, after 4 years, I'm just glad a president actually did their job and is actually, like, you know, moving us to a better future. Is he going to be progressive enough? Is he going to fulfill his campaign promises? We'll have to see. But for a first day, I think it was good. A tentative good. And hopefully, as you said, they won't be corporate interests, or they won't serve corporate interests, they'll serve the people. He did cancel the pipeline, which I was like pretty excited about. So far I think it's going good, but you know, it's only like the first week, so we have to see. All
right, Thomas, what do you think? do you think, was this really, what was his actions extreme, or was it just like, well, I mean, he's supposed to do that? What was your take on it?
I mean, Biden campaign on just returning to pre-Trump. And I think what you're getting with the first day inauguration executive orders is just that. Essentially, it's not so much what he did, it's what he didn't do. And I think, he had the power to cancel all student debt if he wanted to via executive order. He hasn't done that. He said on the campaign that he would reunite the families and release the kids from cages, and he hasn't done that. There is a lot of things that need to be done, and unfortunately, he's just not doing enough. I think when you think back to 1933, you think back to the Great Depression, and you think back to what FDR did in response to an economic crisis. There was pressure on him to enact policy that would drastically change the trajectory of the country. And you can go two ways. You can either embrace some form of social democracy, or you can go and slither towards fascism. And I think my fear with the Biden presidency, it's going to be this case of just go revert everything Trump did and go back to pre-Trump, and that's going to be good enough. And I think the problem with that is that it doesn't address, like Jason said before, it doesn't address the problem of what was going on pre-Trump that was causing so much harm and so much for people to go and vote for Trump as a solution. So I think going forward, there needs to be extreme pressure on Biden. In fact, what gave me a lot of hope was that I saw marches at ICE facilities telling Donald, I won't say the language that they used, but they said to Biden, this is you're not doing enough. This isn't enough. Basically.
Elizabeth, what do you think? Did he do the right thing? What does he need to do?
Yeah, I think in my opinion, I think he's on track on doing what is expected of him. His first year, we're hearing that it's going to be a very important year to see just kind of where he leads the nation. As far as like pressuring in administration, you run a campaign and you promise all these things to a whole bunch of group of people. And basically now he is going to deliver, right? And he's going to deliver to the people that pressure him the most. So I'm hoping that, a lot of the grassroots organizations that continue to organize to deliver these necessary changes in policy that we're going to need in this country to come out of, the economic disasters that we're about to feel even more. And yeah, like just how Thomas was saying with FDR, he didn't just give in to the pressures. I mean, it was labor unions. It was, I think, socialists who were pressuring him. So I'm really hopeful because I do see DSA organizing. I do see a lot of people of color run organizations organizing. And like you said, day one, a whole bunch of people were like, these are our demands. And we just need to continue to do that because lobbyists and corporate America is already doing it too.
And lastly, Jason, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I want to say that I don't want it all to take away from the gravity of having Trump gone and to have a woman of color be sworn in as vice president. That is a momentous thing. It is as momentous a thing as Barack Obama's swearing in. I think it's a step forward for the nation. But we have to focus on policy. I think about, I was not at all impressed. I know a lot of neoliberals, a lot of, comfortable liberals were just, had that huge sigh of relief listening to Joe Biden's inauguration speech. And all I thought to myself was, this speech could have been written for George W. Bush in 2000. It's the same pandering to the moneyed interests, and they want to placate people who are, I have to tell you, we are going to have to get in the streets and continue to pressure this administration on day one. What I really came away was that we are going to have to work harder than ever. If the analysis of Biden is that he wants to have a presidency that people will look back on as a positive thing, that he wants to have that legacy, that he was a good president, a great president, he is going to have to start working for the working class immediately. These orders, these executive orders on day one, it's a start, not nearly enough. There's a ton more that he can do, a ton more that he should do, and we are going to have to pressure him constantly to do that. So I just speak to our allies out there in the field. Don't give up, keep pressuring, stay together, don't attack each other, make sure we know where the real enemy is. It is the oligarchy. We have to keep going after it every single day.
Yeah, I agree. I just feel like his actions on day one were just, okay, that's a no-brainer. Of course, you're going to reverse everything Trump did. That's, again, the bare minimum. And it's so funny, like these, like, for example, let's give Obama as an example. His big legacy is the ACA. They're always talking about their legacy. If you want a damn legacy, then how about be bold and be an FDR president? We're in a crisis.
There's no bigger legacy in the history of the U.S. than the New Deal coming out of the Great Depression.
Exactly.
Now, and it was so popular. FDR was so popular because of his policies. They elected him 4 times, and the oligarchy literally had to write an amendment to stop people like FDR. So think about how much of a legacy Joe Biden could possibly have if he picked up that mantle. And if he did, I will be behind him every step of the way.
Yeah. Thomas, go ahead.
I was literally just going to add to that. I was going to say, you think back to what FDR did. I mean, it's so simple. The answer is so simple. You need, he taxed the rich, and he was the most popular president in American history, right?
Yeah.
And it solved so many issues, right? After coming out of the Great Depression. There's no other way you can do this right now.
Yeah.
We're in the most unequal society since the Egyptian times, right?
Jesus.
You have to do, like, the trajectory that we're going down, like I said before, is if you don't do this, we've seen what happens. History has proven what happens if you don't give people some form of social democracy. And I think if the Biden presidency can think they can just milk toast and walk through this the same way they did during the 2008 banking crisis, like, it's going to be a disaster. Like, it's going to be an absolute disaster. And I think you look back to FDR and you see what happened as a response after coming out of the Great Depression. You can go down that route, or you can go down the route of Germany, and Germany paid for it. They paid for it dearly. And that is my fear, that this presidency is going to not do enough. It's going to try and sort of walk its way through a catastrophe, and it's not going to be good enough.
Yeah. Well, let's go ahead and move on to something a little lighter, which is Bernie mittens. Bernie mittens. We love that. Now, where's the video panel? Okay, that's lame. So there was a lot of memes that happened over the internet. I'm just gonna go ahead and share a couple. For example, look at this one. He's just waiting for his pretzel. Just waiting for his pretzel. The Golden Girls is one of my favorite. Look at that. And then we have this Deadpool. The memes were just going. What are you guys' thoughts on all the memes? Anyone
those
can
videos
go.
are fantastic. I loved it. You know, here in Washington, we even had a special one with Bernie getting wheeled out of an Office Depot on a chair that was being stolen by one of our local anti-heroes, Tim Eyman.
Oh my.
So people around here looked at that one, and you know, it was a nice local one, but really very creative. I like them.
Yeah, it was a really nice, funny moment to come after such a inauguration. Well, everyone, thank you for watching the very first episode of Okay, Now What? We will be premiering Mondays on YouTube. We will be posting full episodes on our IGTV and Facebook. All of our social media is down below. And also maybe follow us individually because our social media is down in the description below. So, yeah, that's it for this week. We will see you next week. Bye-bye now.